All the chicks that I had in there that were due to hatch got stuck in the shell. I lost about 3 dozen chicks because of that. So I went to Walmart and bought me this little Rubbermaid container until I can get a new pan from Blosl, where I bought my incubator. So that's pretty much, it gives you an idea of what this incubator looks like. In my opinion, it costs about $380, but it is the finest incubator that a hobbyist could have. If you're not in a big league where you have to hatch a lot of chickens, you can get by with a little styrofoam tub or some of the Hova incubators, but this is by far the best investment you can make, and it'll last you for years and years, and you can buy replacement parts. Up on top here is an incubator that was given to me by one of my childhood idols, Franklin J. Young of North St. Paul, Minnesota. It's about as old as I am. It's 50 years old, and Franklin had it made by a friend of his, and he used this as a hatcher to put his baby chicks in when he hatched them, and he had a little divider in there. And Franklin has a setup sort of like me. He just had 4 matings, and he didn't have a lot of chicks hatching every week, but it runs off of 110 current, and it has basically the eggs are set at 103 degrees, and you just turn the eggs 2 to 3 times a day. What I usually do on eggs like this, if I hatch them in a still incubator, is I put an X on one side and a 0 on the opposite side, so when you turn the eggs, you'll know if you're where you're at, so you rotate them. But 2 to 3 times a day is sufficient. Over there in the corner is my watering pan, where I fill my water up every evening when I get home from work, and then there's my eggs that I'm saving up to put in the incubator later on Sunday night. That pretty much completes it, and the temperature for this incubator, when it's a forced fan model, is 99.5 degrees, and the humidity range is around 68%, give or take. If you want to decrease your humidity, you can put a piece of cardboard or a piece of plywood paneling over the surface, just an inch or 2 inches or whatever you want to do. If you want to increase your humidity, they have some pads now for sale where you can actually put it in the pan, and it gives you more surface of moisture. We're going to go now to the baby chick room. This is a small little 8 by 10 building that I've been using for about 6 years since we lived on this place, and I've hatched and brooded a lot of my babies in here. I start them off in here for 2 to 3 weeks. It's going to be turned into a room to groom roses for my wife. She raises roses and exhibits them as well as I do. And this cooler in here is going to be part of our cooler to keep the blooms in before we go to the rose shows. Basically, I use pine shavings for my baby chicks. I usually buy the pine shavings at the feed store for about $4 or $5 for a compressed bale, but I just found a man who brought me a whole pickup load for about $80, which will last me nearly 2 years, and I'll show you that pile after a bit, from a furniture company that makes pine shavings from planing the wood. I have a very simple system. I have these little 2x4s nailed together with rabbit wire on top to keep the chicks from getting shavings and their litter manure into their feed and water. I started that this year because the constant battle of keeping the manure and the shavings out of their water. Every night when I get home, I change their water and scrub out their pans and make sure everything is clean, and about once a week I take all my plastic waters and I soak them in a 5-gallon bucket of water with 1 cup of bleach and let them soak there for 6 or 8 hours, and then I rinse them off real good and let them sit in the sun, and it is just so important to have water that's so clean that every time you leave you would say to yourself, would I drink out of that water? That's the thing I've been trying to do for 10 years, and water is the #1 thing. It's free, and it's so important because you could cause your birds to have digestive problems by having bacteria in their stomach, and can actually kill them. These little pans that I have are pans that I get our heart and lung machine and open heart surgery. Our pumps come in that, And you can use your imagination. You could make this out of plywood. I just take these and screw them together or glue them together and cut a little hole in the top and put a 60 to 75 watt bulb in there, a foot or so off the floor, and put some shavings in there, and then I just cut holes in the all the way around so the chicks can go in and out. And mainly I keep my chicks in here until they get pretty much feathered, and then I take them out to the other pens that I have outside. I raise white Plymouth Rock, so if you see some little white rock chicks running around, that's from their parents. And I have red bantams here and also red large fowl. The feed that I use is essentially feed that I buy at the feed store from Wayne. I've used FRM out of Georgia. I've used the feed from Purina, which I like, and it's just essentially a baby chick starter feed, and I keep them on that for about, I guess, 10 weeks, 8 to 10 weeks. And then what I start gradually doing is, my chicks are on free range, I start increasing their feed 1/4 at a time. Say a week, I'll add 1/4 baby chick game bird finisher to 3 parts baby chick feed. And then as the chicks get a little larger, I increase it to 50-50, and then I'll eventually go 3/4 game bird finisher, and then I'll go 1/4 baby chick feed. And then as they really get going around 15-18 weeks maybe, I'll go 3/4 game bird and 1/4 wheat. And the chicks then are on grass and they're getting bugs. And the reason I go on the baby game bird starter and developer and finisher, it seems to be a higher grade of quality of feed. And one reason why is when I exhibit down here, there's a man in Cantonment, Florida named Bud Waters, and Bud beats me all the time, and the only way you can beat somebody is to try to figure out what they do that you're not doing, and that's what Bud does. He uses game bird all the way through. He uses game bird breeder for his bantams, and they've got a shine on them, just won't quit. And so I started doing the same thing about 3 years ago. I'm going to get in a little closer now and show you a little pen that I made. You can use your imagination. This is a cardboard box that I got from the hospital where I work at, that they throw away, and I just take and cut the box out to where I can put in a clamp light. And as you can see, the clamp light's just clamped on the box. I don't recommend this because that cardboard can get weak after a while, and then that could hit the shavings and start a fire. What I would like to do, but I didn't do it for this viewing, is I like to anchor the cord from the ceiling, having it come down, and then if I want to retain some of the heat, I can put some pieces of plywood or paneling around the edges to block it off. As you see down here, the main opening, I have it wide open for you to view, but after we're done viewing, I'll put a piece of cardboard or a piece of plywood paneling on top to keep the heat in, to keep the chicks warm and cozy. Inside here is some little chicks that I hatched a few days ago, some red large fowl and bantams. They were nice and cozy until I spooked them. I've also got some little black chicks in here. I'm hatching for a little 4-H'er for sex links, half white rock, half red. See if she can win some money at a fair with that. But essentially that's how the little chicks start off fresh out of the incubator. I put the water on the floor, on the ground, and have it elevated just a little so the little chicks, the bantams, can drink. But as they get to be about 4 to 5 days old, they can have a little 2x4 thing where they can hop up there. But I try to give them a little chance right there. And then feed wise, I just have a little feeder that you buy at the feed store with a quart jar where you just fill it up. And I change this litter out about once a week. When it gets to be 50% manure and 50% shavings, that's the time to change your litter on any of your chickens, because ammonia starts setting in and it gets real stinky, and it's just not practical for good rearing of chickens. Like Lloyd says, you don't need some real fancy buildings and everything, but most important thing is to be clean, fresh air, clean water, and if they get cold, they'll go back into the lights. Alright, we're going to go now and look at some of the older chicks that are in the back. picture of something that's kind of old and worn out. This is a crate that a neighbor's household goods was shipped in by from Alaska about 5 years ago. And it's 4 by 8 foot type wooden crate. They put furnitures and household goods in, and he said, "You want it?" And I said, "Sure." So we just laid it on the ground here, and I made a little pin out of it. I've used it as a brooder. I've used it for my bantams as a breeding pin. It's about worn out, and a few weeks ago we had a horrible storm come in, and I just took some old tarp that I had and put on top of the roof because it was leaking, and it kept the water from getting in. I've also got one of those little white chick brooders with a light bulb in it. These chicks are just about ready to have their light bulb removed because they've got a lot of feathers on them. This just shows you how you can use something like this, but this is not a 4 by 8, this is an 8 by 8. An 8 by 8 pin made like this, 4 to 5 feet tall, off the ground with plywood floor, works very good as a brooder pin. You can put them on skids, 4 by 4 type skids, and pull them around with your tractor or a truck or something. And there's nothing wrong with them whatsoever. I'm going to go in a little bit closer. I've got some green grass that I give them, which is basically just oats that have gotten out of hand from my sprouted oats that I've been using, but now I've got so much green grass growing I don't need sprouted oats much anymore. I've got a little feeder in there for them and a little water, which I have high off the ground because they're scratchers. They just scratch like crazy and get it in their litter, so I have to change that, clean it out every night. I've got about 25 or 30 large fowl and bantam chicks in here. I'll try to scan in a little bit closer. See some of the chicks. Another one of those sex-linked barred rocks that I'm hatching for a little girl. I often thought about crossing those barred rocks onto my white rocks and develop a new strain, but my wife says not to do that. Stay away from any more breeds than I have. And you can see the large combs on the little chicks. Those are the roosters. Get a lot of roosters. I seem to get more roosters early in the year, and most of my pullets come later in the year. Why, I have no idea, but I just have to hatch them. And my first chick of the year was a big old pullet, so I might be my best show bird of the year. She came out of pin 3. But that gives you an idea. They got fresh shavings on here, and they're very comfortable. You hear them just, you'll hear them in there just clucking away, just happy. If they're not happy, they'll squawk. I wanted to show you in the other pin, I have a chick that's what I call a squawker. He just squawks and squawks and squawks, and if you get a chick like that, you might as well get rid of him. He's a cull. They're stupid, and they have no smarts whatsoever, and if he's out in the open range and a hawk is up in a tree looking for something to get, he'll be the first one to go. So you're wasting your time with these. There's a little pullet that just came into the middle of the picture right there, large fowl. All right, let's go to the other little chick pen. This is a building that was given to me by one of my neighbors. It was his mother's chicken house. It's around 50 years old, I guess, built in the 50s or something like that, late 40s, and it works real well. It's a sort of an A-framed house with 2-foot sides coming up, and then, as you can see, the high arch of the roof. It's made out of tin, and she had a 2-foot by about, I guess, 10-12 foot long building and about 8 feet wide, and they could move it around with a tractor, but it's pretty heavy. It's solid wood. It's no plywood whatsoever, and it's got a wooden floor on it, and the litter stays dry all the time. Last year I had my white rocks in here, and I had straw on the ground, and it was just beautiful. These chicks are ready to come out. I just took their little white brooder out of here, and so they're going to be kind of spooky. That little light bulb has been their mother for the last couple of months, and these chicks are ready to go out on open range. They're fully feathered, mostly bantams, a few large fowl. And what I do is I hang a big feeder from the ceiling, and this will give the chicks enough feed for 3 to 4 days, and then I have a large waterer that's elevated off the ground on an old wire spool, and that could also be hung from the ceiling. And change the water out every day and make sure the shavings are out of the litter. I also give them green grass, but I'm also letting them run loose now. I had a problem with a cat, and the cat came in here and killed 5 of my baby chicks underneath a broody hen, and we trapped the cat and took him to the pound. But I've had a worst year I've ever had for cats this year. I had another broody hen that had 6 or 7 of my pin 1 bantam chicks, and that cat killed all but 2 chicks. So either the chicks were stupid or the chicks were smart. They didn't get caught, but they did it all at night, and we got rid of both the cats. But we're very close to Good Friday, and Good Friday is last year I had a fox come through here, and the foxes, I know when I first got this pen about 5 years ago, I left the door open one night and the fox came in here and killed 9 of my biggest chicks. They were all hatched in January, and left me with just 2 chicks. They must have had to be smart. They took off running in the dark, and but varmints are just a horrible thing. The people up north, you've got to watch out. You can see I have 1-inch mesh wire here on the bottom. If you have weasels like I had in Washington State, you can't have a 2-inch mesh wire. The weasels will go right through it. You've got to have a 1-inch mesh. And then you got to watch out for the skunks, because we had skunks in Washington State, but I don't have any skunks down here. My biggest enemy is cats and possums. And there's no water around me, so I don't have much problems with raccoons. Raccoon has to have water to wash its food. And we see some on the highways that are killed, but let's see if I can get in here. The wind's just blowing like crazy, so I'm sorry for the shavings going everywhere. We were about ready to get rained on, but I've got some nice little single comb bantam cockerels in here that are much smaller than they were last year. There's that big pullet there. It's right in the middle of the screen. That's my oldest pullet of the year. Large fowl, and she should be a beauty when she grows up. And I just have a light bulb up here, and I wanted to tell you something. As you can see up here, I have nothing but these reflector clamp-on lights, and I have about 10 of them, and I like them. And I just change my light bulbs out before they go out, because on these little bitty chickens, if the light bulbs go out and it's real cold, they could die. So what I do is I change the bulbs out about every 2 to 3 weeks, put them back in a new container, and use them in my house and outside in my so that if they ever pop out in the house or whatever, it won't be bad. But I want my eggs, I want my light bulbs to be brand new, and I try to use a soft coating type light bulb by General Electric or whatever. I've had problems with the clear light bulbs, the cheap ones. It seems like if the chicks are in there and it's a big bulb, they can go blind, and they go blind as they become more mature. I've lost some pullets' eyes, and some of the problems could have been from the light bulbs. And I've also thought about going with bug lights, which are coated. I've also thought about spraying the bulbs with a red spray can type of spray to soften the light bulbs, because all I want the light for is for heat. I don't care about them getting exposure to the to heat. That pretty much sums up the baby chick pen right here. We'll go now to the back to see the large fowl. On my way back to the back section of my property, I thought I'd stop and show you this pile of shavings. For you who are not able to get shavings in this manner, the bag of compressed shavings that we get at feed stores and that work very nicely. You might also check out some horse people. They'll buy it by the pallets. They'll get 50 to 100 bags at a time at $1 cheaper maybe than the feed store. You may contact them and ask them if you could buy 3 or 4 bags from them, and they might give it to you at their cost. But the shavings in the bag works very nicely. They're pine shavings, which is very common in the South. When I lived in Washington State as a young boy, I had Douglas fir shavings, which is, I think, a little bit better. It absorbs better. Then you see the straw bale right there. I really like that for my large fowl. I usually get 10 to 15 bales. It costs about $3.50 a bale. It's either wheat or oat straw, and then I compost it, and after about a year with the chicken manure and the dirt and the horse manure that I add to it, I use it on my wife's roses. But I wanted just you to see this. This was a pickup that had its sides on it about 1.5 to 2 feet above the cab. And I saw the man at a gas station the other night. I've seen him pass by my house, and they call him the shavings man. And I walked up to him and I said, "Are you the man I've been looking for?" And I looked at his hair and his clothes, and there was shavings everywhere. And I said, "You're the man." And he came the next morning and dropped his load off. It was about $80, and to me, it's probably enough to last me 2 years. So what I'll have to do tomorrow is in one of my buildings make a giant bin and start transporting all the shavings into the bin to get it out of the weather, because it'll get wet. But I just wanted you to know this is a type of litter that you can use, and litter is a very, very important part. And I'll pan over to the side. You'll see bags of leaves. I use leaves by the jillions. I pick them up on the side of the road, and I'll put the bags of oak leaves or maple leaves if you live up north in my large fowl pens, and then they break them all down for exercise, looking for something to eat, and then I come along and rake them up and put them in a trailer behind my tractor, and then put them on my roses. So you can use leaves. It works nicely. Pine needles. Some people up north have chopped up corn cobs. That'll work fine, but this is pretty much what's available for you around the country. Now we'll go back and see those large fowl. Well, I finally made it to the back. Got the batteries charged up a little bit, and this is my old original pin, 50 feet by 50 feet with 5 dividers, 10 feet apart, which gives me 5 pins, 10 by 50. And this year I did something where I took some of the pins and put a divider down the middle, so I could have approximately a 25 to 30 foot pin. And it works out because a trio or a mating pin of reds don't need a facility all that large. I usually let one breeding pin out in the morning, and then we throw some bread in there in the afternoon about 1 o'clock, my wife does, and then we let another pin out, so they all get a chance to get outside and get a little green grass and some exercise. I just love to do that. I'm just panning here. My pin has taken a pretty good beating over the last 2 years. We've had 2 hurricanes. One year we had Hurricane Danny, and he gave us some 75-mile-an-hour winds, but he gave us 30 inches of rain, and he just beat the pieces out of my buildings. And then last year we had Hurricane Georges, and he came in here with 70, 80-mile-an-hour winds with 20 inches of rain. So it pretty much whipped up all my wire that's on the top that I put on about 6-7 years ago, and it's just a 2-inch, 6-foot width of wire, and I just stretch it across and tie it together, and keeps the possums and the owls and stuff out. This year I'm going to go with electric fence as well as the wire, but it'll take me probably a day just to put that wire up. I'll stop right about in here. You'll see 2 types of buildings. Last year I built the building you see right there, which is a 4x8 building, 5 foot tall on the top and about 4 foot in the back. And it was open, and it worked pretty good. It held 5 or 6 birds, but geez, the rain got in there so badly it was just a disaster. So I'm going to tear all them down and start over again. This year I started my tree house, and I'll pan in here, get a little bit closer for you. This here is a 4 foot by 4 foot box, above the ground about 3 feet. And I have it on 4 by 4 inch posts that are 5 feet long, and I buried them in the ground 2 feet, put concrete down the bottom to hold them good. I just took a 4 foot by 4 foot sheet of 3/4 inch plywood and made a floor, and then I just made me a little box. I think it was 34 inches in the front and 28 in the back with a tin roof on it. And then I went ahead and put a little door on the front, so when it gets real cold I can just lower that door, and it worked great this year. The roosters didn't lose any of their points from the cold weather, and the rain doesn't seem to get in too badly under the pans, even though we've had some heavy rains, which we're going to get in just a little bit. But this is my newest thing, and I'm going to convert all these buildings to these little tree houses. I'm in my pin 2 White Rock pin, and this shows you the inside of the 4x8 pin with the front, and I just use straw in there for their litter. I have a 2x4 going across 8 feet, and I take and round off the tops of the 2x4 with a rasp to keep it from being sharp so it doesn't hurt their feet. Chickens like to have a round type roost, so I always been doing that with either 2x2s, or because of the length I used here was 2x4s, and they don't have any troubles with their feet. And then I have a regular feeder in there that holds about 8 to 10 pounds of feed. I try not to give them more than about two days worth of feed at a time, because if the old feed stays in there, it can get moldy, and if that happens, at least down here, that molded feed turns the chicken's digestion tract haywire, and what happens is they start getting a green discharge from their vent, and down here in the south, the people call that the greens, and that's death. They'll get the greens start on Monday and they'll be dead by Thursday, and the only thing that I've heard that will cure it is Tylen 50, and you have to give them that antibiotic shot I don't know how many times or what the dosage is, but I've lost some birds in the very beginning, so I give the chickens enough feed that they'll eat in one setting, which is normally about 4 ounces per bird, and then let them go hungry. They'll be all right. My watering system is very simple. I just have a faucet dripping constantly with above the ground, so they don't get their litter and they don't stand in it and everything, and I've been using that for a long time, and I just clean them out once every week or two with bleach, get new gallon buckets like this at Walmart in the paint department. All right, let's go to another pin. This is my pin 3 mating. This is number 68, the best of breed bird at Connorsville this past year, and he's got 3 females in this pen. One's in the nest right now laying an egg, and these other 2 are out with him. I have a similar thing here. I just have an old oil changing pan that I got at Walmart 2 or 3 years ago, and just let the water drip in there, and then I have the feed hanging underneath here, as you can see, and then I'll pan in here. There's my roof that I just added this year, well, a few months ago, with hinges. And then I have a light bulb in here. And one thing that I would recommend, the roost I put too close to the back. I should have put it right in the middle of the box, because the chickens sometimes will reverse themselves. They seem to like to have their heads towards the light, or they don't like that light bulb blasting in their eyes, and they'll poop on the manure. Will get on some of the eggs in there if I don't get out here and change the eggs, get the eggs, because I try to get them every night. Okay, that's the divider. It's this pin's 6 foot tall, and all I did was stretched a 2x4 10 feet